Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew, and welcome back to Frames of Space. My guest for today's episode is Sam Kahn, who is a senior editor at Persuasion and the writer behind the Substack Castalia. So, he lives in a world that I've spent a lot of time around, the world of digital magazines, pitch meetings, and the broader question of what it means to build a life around writing at a time when the economic foundations of writing, media, journalism all feel shakier than ever. And so that's what we spend a lot of this episode talking about, because there is a basic tension that sits underneath a lot of writing today. On the one hand, it's never been easier to publish your work. You can start a Substack, build an audience, write exactly what you want, and reach readers directly. But on the other hand, it's still incredibly hard to make that sustainable, financially, creatively, even just psychologically. And so you end up with this strange question. If writing is more accessible than ever, why does it still feel so difficult to build a life around it? Now, Sam has thought quite a bit about that mismatch. He edits political and cultural essays for a living, and he has sharp views on liberalism, institutions, and the internet. But he also writes fiction, and he thinks seriously about his writing style, and he talks quite a bit in this episode about how there is a clear difference between the writing that pays the bills and the writing that feels closer to his soul. So this episode is partly about the future of writing, partly about the economics of media, but also an interesting question that lies underneath all of it, which is, how do you navigate the tension between writing for your audience and writing for your own soul? Now, here's my conversation with Sam Kahn. Hope you enjoy. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Sam Kahn, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto this podcast.
Yeah, nice to see you, Andrew.
Yeah, it's nice to see you too. Maybe I'll start by probably giving away a bit of information I've never given away on this podcast before, which has to do with you in that you're kind of one of those unique people where I've seen you dozens and dozens of times, but this is one of the very first one-on-one conversations that we've had. Do you want to get into that?
Into how we've interacted? Yeah, I mean, it's through Persuasion. So I edit for Persuasion. Andrew is a storied legacy member of Persuasion. So we've interacted in that setting before.
Yeah, we used to I don't know if this is probably, I don't know if this is embarrassing for me to say, but there would be times when we would have these weekly pitch meetings where it's just you and Luke, the other senior editor, and Yasha Monk, who hopefully people know, but if they don't know, he's the head of the publication. He hosts a great podcast, yada, yada, yada. You guys would be going through ideas, and you guys would all have your professional game faces on. And I would just be sitting there with this huge shit-eating grin the entire time while just staying silent. And it was amazing. Yeah. And I just want you to know that it is truly nice to see you again.
Yeah, that's great. No, we talked about kind of making it in journalism, and we were just trying to chat about how to do a piece. It's obviously very difficult to do. So it's great to see that you're doing this.
Yeah. And I personally really enjoy this because I think that this, I guess, to say stuff I usually don't get that personal on this podcast, but maybe I'll make an exception for you, is that one thing I am genuinely really, really grateful for is that this podcast feels like one of the few mediums where I can just say whatever I want. And I can be unconstrained by all the norms and decorum of society, as long as it's getting to some broader truth. And I hope that you'll indulge me for this conversation.
Sure.
Yeah. So tell me, why do you write and why do you edit for Persuasion?
So I've been writing obsessively for kind of most of my life at this point. I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. I was writing in all kinds of different forms throughout my adult life. And essentially, I was really stuck for a long time in terms of getting content out. and then sort of found my way through Substack. When Substack kind of showed up, I started writing in 2022. I have my own Substack. Actually, I was just kind of promoting it and reached out to one of the editors at Persuasion, and it just turned out to be kind of luck of the draw in terms of timing that the editor was looking to replace himself. So I've been with Persuasion for about, I think it's 3 years, which is actually, I think, the longest job I've ever had. And it's just great. It's a really nice publication. It's smart. It's fun to do. I have my own publication on Substack, which is more literary minded. So I edit that. I have my own Substack. I write a lot of fiction in basically my spare time. So yeah, and I have a whole background in documentary film, but the whole time I was doing that, I was trying to figure out how to make a living as a writer, couldn't figure it out. So now I'm like marginally making a living as a writer. So that's kind of my journey.
Yeah, you're like like if Will Deresiewicz was here, he would be talking about how writers are just like making a subsistence, like living on a subsistence existence. Is that you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm can support a family. Like I'm very happy with where I am right now, but that's between Persuasion. I teach at a university. Yeah, I have kind of my supplemental income. I freelance a bit. So it works out, but it's extraordinarily hard to make a living, and it seems to be getting harder all the time.
Yeah, and it's like this like snowball effect, but it's like a snowball downhill where like the incentives for journalism and how hard it is to get into the industry, they just keep going downhill.
Yeah, so I mean, I graduated college in 2008, and it was right at the moment when kind of the bottom really fell out of journalism, which is what I've been planning to do. And then there was sort of this long period in the 2010s where, I mean, there was just nothing. It was like, there's a lot of publications that have basically disappeared by this time, like with the Huff Post and BuzzFeed and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I wasn't feeling it. I didn't really break into it. And I did break into kind of documentary filmmaking at that time, but it just felt like 10 years of wasted space. I mean, social media was just dominant. And then Substack came out. It just felt like this, like really this gift, because the whole premise was that everybody's attention spans were hopelessly shrinking, and then suddenly there was this new way of having a vessel for writers to really write whatever they wanted, and there's this lovely community and all of that. But it's still, I mean, the money is still not there with Substack. So I've been lucky enough to have the Persuasion job, which is through the Substack network. And like little by little, people are starting to figure things out. But I mean, it's stupid how difficult it is.
Yeah, but I do think Persuasion is, and yeah, like I do want to get into Substack eventually, maybe very soon, because Substack is very accessible. I think it's a great platform, even if it's not particularly profitable. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Persuasion, since that's an example of, like, I know a lot of the people there. I think they're great, and also like it houses a lot of A-listers like Yasha Monk and Francis Fukuyama. But like at the same time, it's not like they're like a massively profitable organization. Like in fact, they're even like a nonprofit. Like, so maybe how about this? Like, I want you to give our audience the pitch. Like, why do you think people should read Persuasion? What makes it unique?
Yeah, I mean, Persuasion's my favorite job ever. So I have nothing but good to say about Persuasion. I mean, I guess the template of Persuasion is that it's really trying to create kind of a liberal voice, like a voice of sanity, basically. And the feeling has been that there's these big skews to the right and to the left, and that seemed to be where this whole online space was going. And meanwhile, the kind of mainstream publications are sort of slowly sinking. And then Persuasion is Yasha, who founded as a political science professor. So it has a lot of gravitas from that. The people who tend to gravitate towards it, they just tend to be serious people who know what they're talking about. But then it's not within kind of academic confines. I mean, it's for a general interest audience. So a lot of what we're doing is just trying to think through what a liberal sensibility is. I think a great deal of the impetus for it sort of came out of 2020 and came out of this just moment of woke and of kind of the progressives basically capturing liberalism in this very deleterious way. And so a lot of it was about trying to kind of shore up the ramparts against wokeism and progressivism and just really think through like, okay, what are liberal principles? Because a lot of people who call themselves liberal are acting in really illiberal ways right now. And just trying to say like, okay, what are the foundations here? What's a liberalism that's really sustainable? And at a moment when the whole society seems to be going crazy on the wings. And it's basically an article every weekday. Yasha's prolific in terms of podcasting. So there's a lot. I mean, it's just a nice combination between being domestic and international and being kind of reactive to current events, but then having these very substantive pieces. And Francis Fukuyama is now a partner with it. And I mean, he's obviously one of the leading intellectuals of my lifetime and my parents' lifetime. So I mean, he just writes fabulously every time. So that's it. I mean, it's just a really cool organization.
Yeah, maybe if I'll give the audience like one more frame of reference, you've talked quite a bit about how Persuasion is trying to advocate for a liberal society. Maybe like one frame of reference is that I'm sure that there are at least some listeners of mine who have heard of the other Substack that has launched a little bit more recently called The Argument, run by Jerusalem Demsis, which also tries to promote a liberal society, tries to promote productive disagreement, and is often willing to critique the excesses of like what might have been called wokeism in the past. Maybe the long and short of it is that Persuasion has a lot of similarities with The Argument, but like with far fewer paywalled articles and a much greater focus on foreign policy and political theory. Would you say that's accurate?
To be honest, I haven't actually looked at The Argument. I saw it came out, but of course I'm partisan to Persuasion, so I was annoyed that The Argument seemed to be stepping on our turf a little bit. But I mean, I to be totally honest, I haven't actually looked at it. But I wish them the best. There's plenty of room for multiple liberal publications.
Yeah, and if you want, you can always try doing collaborations with them, and I'm sure they'd be on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, maybe let's take a look a little bit about your Substack, because we talked a little bit about the incentives of Substack. What would you say? What do you prefer about Substack compared to other media outlets, and how has it changed you as a writer?
Well, I mean, Substack completely changed my life. It's like, I mean, it's sort of hard to overstate what a big deal it is. I mean, I feel like 10 years ago, everybody I knew who was interested in this was, I mean, they're just dying on the vine. And so, I mean, the way I was writing all the time, I was writing prolifically, and it was just basically going straight into my laptop. And I don't think I even really started pitching seriously until around 2020. And it was just, I mean, it was just terrible. It was like I'd send something out and something would go over the transom and somebody would publish it, but usually they would just edit it out of all possible recognition.
Or they would ghost you. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, normally you just don't hear back. Like there weren't that many publications. The ones that survived were these establishment publications that were basically impossible to break into. I mean, there were some nice ones like 3 a.m. magazine, Los Angeles Review of Books. I mean, there were a few. What I was doing was a little bit more literary. And then Substack came out in 2017. I wasn't aware of it until 2022. And when I did, it was just like, oh my God, like where did this come from? And so I started then at the beginning. I mean, I didn't know anybody. So it was just crickets at the beginning, but I was just writing a lot. And then like little by little, like people started leaving these long comments and there was this really nice community. And this was at a time when everybody assumed that there was something about the internet that was inherently toxic. So, I mean, just the idea of like friendly, thoughtful comments on a post was not what I was expecting. It was like inconceivable. And I just kept at it. Getting the Persuasion job was really great. And that allowed me to basically transition out of documentary producing, which I wanted to do. And then it was just a lot of writing what I wanted to write. It's just, I mean, it's great. It's like a playground for writers. It has its limits. Like, I mean, it's hard to get into like really, really long form stuff, but all these very serious people, like professors, household name writers, have started kind of migrating over to it. And it's just, I mean, it's just such incalculably better than what was available before Substack came out.
Yeah, like I feel like there was a paradigm shift over the past few years where first it was just like people trying to make a name for themselves, like Matt Iglesias after he left Vox. And now they're like people like Derek Thompson who spent like over a decade at a very mainstream outlet now write in Substack, which just shows how prolific it's become.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you say Substack has changed over the time? Do you think the incentives have gotten better, worse, or about the same?
Well, it's gotten a bit worse. So it's a big question right now.
Is it like the beginning of the slope of enshittification? Is that what you think?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, look, I'm not privy to what's really going on in terms of like the dollars and cents of Substack. I mean, they got a lot of venture capital funding. They were able to produce this thing, which is great for writers. I think in terms of just actually making enough money, actually having kind of ordinary readers there, I think that's been the struggle. And I think at a certain point, they're looking at the return on investment that they need to have. And it was kind of like, okay, we need to do something a bit different. So what they always could have done, and they haven't done, is to turn on ads, to have ads go through the platform. They've been very hardline about that. So they need to get their profit in other ways. So they introduced Notes, which is basically a Twitter clone. It's much nicer than Twitter. I like using Notes, but it does.
Would you say that like the difference between Substack Notes and Twitter is like the difference between a 4 out of 10 and a 1 out of 10? Do you think that's the case?
Maybe a 6 out of 10 and a 2 out of 10. I mean, I never got into Twitter. I was trying to at some point. It was just, I thought it was terrible. I just couldn't find myself interested in it. Substack Notes can be interesting, but the problem with it is that you sort of get addicted to the app and then you're like a little bit slower to read people's stuff. So there's a certain crowd of kind of Substack purists like me who are sort of longing for what it was like in 2023 when it really felt like this kind of writer's paradise that Silicon Valley had just gifted us for some reason. And we all sort of knew that it wasn't going to stay like that forever. And I think Notes probably has begun that enshittification process. Everybody's subscriptions are down a little bit, except for Persuasion is doing great. But everybody sort of feels like some of the energy has gone out of it. So I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the next turn of the wheel is. But the main thing is that Substack proved that this was possible. They proved that basically, to put it in kind of grandiloquent terms, that the internet could mature, that it didn't just all have to be social media slop, that you really could use internet space for substantive dialogue. And now I think people can take that and move in different directions. The main thing is it's much, much better than what was available 5 or 10 years ago. So even if there are complaints, they're sort of good complaints to be having.
Yeah, like it's possible that like Substack started out like very, very, very good, and now there's like one fewer very, but it's still very good.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do wonder about the effect that like writing on Substack has had on you. Like, has it made you a better writer? Has it allowed you to approach politics in a more nuanced way? Anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think about this a lot. So it's definitely made me a different writer. I mean, it's made me much more responsive to audience, which I think is good. I mean, there's kind of a way I've come to think about this, which is it's like like I've never done comedy, but I've watched a lot of like TV shows about stand-up comedians. And so there's sort of this thing that it's like people think they're good and they work on their material on their own. But the only way to really get good is to just sort of battle test it. So, I mean, I'm very prolific with my writing. I put stuff out usually a couple times a week, sometimes more than that. And I feel like just volume, just doing things a lot makes you better. I mean, it just kind of gets you into a flow with it. And what I was doing before was much more kind of writing towards an abstract, like imagining that there was this kind of idyllic uh, publishing industry that hadn't existed if it ever had for decades, and sort of writing towards that. So just actually responding to an audience, getting a sense for how a piece is going to do as opposed to not do. Sometimes caring if it's sometimes not. Sometimes you care, sometimes you don't care about what kind of response it's going to get. I think that's all been to the good. There are a lot of people who write on Substack in a much more reactive way, so they know like what's going to hit, and they tend to write. There's sort of this new way of online writing, which is like paragraphs that are no more than a sentence or too long, and that tends to do better. There are certain themes that tend to do better, and I try not to do that. I try not to get sucked into the game of like responding to Substack. So, but my writing, knowing that things are going to appear online, is a little bit different than writing, imagining that I was going to send it out in like the slush pile to an agent.
Yeah. Okay. I do like the point you made about how you become a better writer just because of sheer volume. Like the more you write, if you just write like a fuck ton, then eventually you'll become a better writer.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I mean, this was a whole kind of internal debate that I had for a lot of my 20s. Like, I mean, I definitely, coming out of college, I think I definitely had this sort of romantic idea that there's like the thing that you really manage to say, and you kind of need to go into seclusion and work with yourself in order to come out with this like great thing. And then there was another way of looking at it. And the Malcolm Gladwell books, which were really popular at that time, kind of crystallized that for me, which is just like you do it a lot. You do 10,000 hours. And in the process of 10,000 hours, that's how you get good. That's the talent. It's not some crystalline thing within yourself that you just kind of put yourself out there and you do it over and again. And then that process kind of shapes you. And there's something about Gladwell himself that really bothered me. So I was annoyed that I found this persuasive. But I think that's basically right. I mean, I think that people treat writing in a very precious way sometimes, and they probably shouldn't. They probably should think of writing as being just more of like a practice and a discipline. And the more you do of it, just the more sides of yourself that you find, basically.
Yeah, and like you would unlock sides of yourself that you didn't think were previously there. Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think your inner life, I think anybody's inner life is just huge. And I mean, it was nice how you introduced this about kind of getting outside of normal social modes, that if we're in society, if we're around other people, we tend to present like a very narrow slice of ourselves. But if we're really in solitude and we're really writing and you really just let your subconscious go, it turns out that the inner self is just unbelievably capacious. And so you just find all these different things. I mean, I think when I started trying to write fiction, there was a lot of like, okay, like what's my story? What's the thing that's coming from my autobiography that I really want to say? And I was kind of wrestling with that. And then the more I write, the more that question sort of recedes. And it's just a little bit more of like, oh, anything could be interesting. Like if you have this kind of system that's capable of writing, then any passing mood, any person you meet, almost any influence at all, you can kind of transmute into something that's interesting to you anyway. That's a pleasure to get out.
Yeah. Okay. So one brief tangent I'll go on before going back to what we're talking about right now. The whole thing about how like just sheer volume of stuff allows you to get better. Like just writing over and over again allows you to become a better writer. I noticed that with podcasting too, where I feel like if I were to re-listen to all the podcasts I did back when I was just like a university student and I didn't really know what I was doing, there would be a part of me that would feel disappointed and be like, hey, you should have asked this question instead. That would have been far more interesting. But just like me doing this dozens and dozens and dozens of times, it has just allowed me to get the hands-on experience that I wouldn't get just from like reading articles about how to be a good podcaster, for example. But yeah, you mentioned something that I thought was very interesting about like any passing mood, any stranger you meet, like a lot of the time there's stuff that you don't think is that interesting to write about, but it turns out to be interesting to write when you just like put words on the page. How do you write when you like let's say that you're in a mood where you feel like you don't have anything to say. How do you write then?
Well, I don't. Like I only write if I feel like I have something to say. So, uh, but usually I feel like I have something to say. So it's a very interesting process. It's very mysterious how it works. But what started to happen at some point in my life was that basically I would feel something that would be like a tickle, which is like, oh, like this is something I want to say, and there are a lot of different dimensions to it. Like something it's sometimes it's more essayistic, and it's just kind of like usually something's going on in the world or you react to something, and then sometimes it's this very cool thing that happens where suddenly whatever it is, you're having some stray thought or there's an interaction that you're part of, and an idea for a story or a novel or a play comes to you. And when that started happening to me in my mid 20s, it was just an exciting thing. And so that was something to really like cultivate, which is a certain sometimes I think of it as kind of like letting your brain go a little bit soft, like
Is this like how you know the concept of diffuse thinking mode, where
yeah.
like imagine that you're like playing a professional chess match. There are some professional chess players where if it's like a very very long game, like a 30-minute game or even longer, sometimes what they do is they look at the board intensely, they make a move, and then they stand up and they start walking back and forth the room because that way they're not like intensely thinking about the game, they're just letting their thoughts wander, and that might give them better ideas than if they were to just stare at the board the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, like at this point, I can feel it sort of tangibly, sort of the way I don't really know anything about kind of brain science, but there's a whole theory about what is it that there's kind of the analytic side of your brain, and then there's a much softer, more holistic kind of side. And usually what you want to do is you want to have the analytic side basically serving the other side. So it's like you get these impressions that are much more kind of holistic, and so I really try to listen to that, and so it's like there's a feeling of like, okay, like this is the story I want to write, this is a novel I want to write. Actually, for my essayistic writing, I try to do it in a similar way of just like getting the feeling. The deep song might be another way to put it, and then you use your like analytic apparatus to kind of serve that. But yeah, usually if you're just like if I'm trying to think hard about something, they are trying to be like, "Oh, okay, I want to think of a story right now." It almost never works. There is a certain receptivity that seems to be a crucial part of the process.
So if you just be like, I want to think of a story right now, I want to write something either for your own Substack or you really want to come up with ideas for the next Persuasion editorial meeting or something. Like you can't force yourself to come up with ideas or else you'll just have like writer's block or something.
And it doesn't work. There's something about the way the brain clenches that it's engaging in the wrong way. That I think I mean, the famous way to put this is, I mean, Keats calls it negative capability, where you try to kind of relax yourself and then let something come in, and then that and whatever it is that you're responding to usually is something that's a little bit bigger than you. If it's the subconscious or some kind of a collective sensibility, so you're trying to tap into something that goes beyond kind of your everyday ego, and I think it's very important to write that way, or any kind of artistic engagement you do that way. And then I mean the way I write, I guess it's kind of distinctive, which surprises me. But there's sort of this whole belief about how people are supposed to write, which is that you edit and you do all these drafts of things, and I just don't do that. Like basically, I get one draft of anything I do, and I mean it's like intense. Like I'm really concentrating on it if I write that, but I basically never edit anything unless somebody makes me do it. And I've come to really believe in that process. I've come to really believe that it's like there's like a kind of breath that basically you get the idea presents itself to you somewhere in your brain or in your organism, and then you just try to like put that down on paper, basically exactly as it came to you, or exactly as like the original kind of platonic form of it is. So that's become basically my belief about writing.
Isn't that kind of ironic though? Like you're a senior editor at like a prominent publication and you don't really edit your own work.
It is a little ironic. Yeah, I mean, I'm a professional editor and I don't believe in editing. I mean, I can I can justify this. So, I mean, editing means a few different things. Like, editing is more of like a political act. It's more about kind of like landscaping a particular publication. Uh, so I mean, Persuasion is very like there's an editorial line with Persuasion. I mean, we're liberal, we're kind of highbrow, and there is like a particular kind of Persuasion style, which I mean, I've just been doing this for a few years, so I know how to do it, and and so there's kind of a process of getting pieces more to that style. Um, yeah, I mean, not everybody is equally gifted as a writer. Like, sometimes people like really have something to say, but they're not necessarily a writer, and so you're kind of like working with them to sort of get that out of the piece. Uh, the Republic of Letters, which is my kind of extracurricular project that I edit on Substack, that has a different editorial philosophy. I basically don't edit the pieces at all, really, like sometimes for clarity. And that's a little bit more reflective of kind of my own belief about writing. So I solicit pieces or people come to me with pieces and I usually just kind of let it be. And the idea with that is that most publications are rooted in kind of the industrial age and it has to do like the editors, the owners kind of control it. And there's a particular craft to working with that. And I have this kind of idealistic belief that you can have publications that are a little bit more writer driven, where the writers just write in their way and then the editors kind of curate and make space for them. And readers understand that it's going to be much more heterogeneous than what you'd be used to from like a New York Times or like a more traditional publication.
If you saw someone submit an article to you, like they were submitting an article to Persuasion and they wanted you to look over it, and it had the same style and formatting as the pieces in your own Substack, do you think that you would have accepted the article, or do you think that you would have just had them go through heavy revisions?
There's very little overlap, actually. And it's interesting. Like everybody kind of feels it. So people would submit to one thing or another thing. Sometimes they'll be working with the same author for two different publications. I mean, Persuasion pays significantly more than Republic of Letters. And so if something's a little bit more like researched or more political, I'll kind of route them to Persuasion. Republic of Letters is much more like personal essays, kind of like literary writing. It's a different ballgame.
So you made a guest appearance on The Things Not Named recently, where you said something that I think is kind of fascinating. Maybe it like sums up a little bit of your ethos. You say, "I get paid for the stuff I care the least about. There's an almost perfectly inverse proportional relationship between the thing that I put time and effort and love into and the things that get monetarily rewarded." End quote. Could you talk about that inverse proportion between what you care about and what you get rewarded for?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story of my adult life. So, I mean, I worked for about 10 years as a documentary producer. I mean, I was working for like Netflix and A&E and different kinds of channels. And I mean, the stuff that you get paid for is not the stuff that you really care about or want to do. And there are perfectly intelligent reasons for that. It's just what you get paid for ultimately is things that like people don't want to do themselves. Like that's work. Any kind of transaction is basically, everybody who turns over money in a transaction, ultimately they're kind of turning it over unwillingly because in some way they have to get the thing that they're blocked from. Money tends to serve power, basically. Like the older I get, the more I kind of understand that. So if you're working at any kind of a job, you're working in the business of like necessities or the business of coercion in some way, or just the business of like the power structure. And so you like there's a Bob Dylan song, like everybody serves. You like, and the question is, who are you going to serve? And I've always thought of writing as basically being the free space on the board where you're not really serving anybody. You are, but you're serving yourself. You're serving your soul. You're serving your God, whatever it is. And So I understand that there's no real monetary reward for that. And it's kind of like, why should there be? Because lots and lots of people want to write because it's expressive for them. It makes perfect sense that the supply demand curves would all be off. Like there's no reason why readers would really want to pay to access to like writer souls. So what I've come to really believe is that writing is basically like true writing is really outside of kind of the economic matrix. And so the way after a great deal of pain, like the great deal of kind of the way I've been organizing my life is that, you know, I do the things that are for money and then I do the things that are for me. And there's no particular reason to think that they would interact.
So what type of commentary are you like, do you want to be known for, and what type of commentary do people generally know you for? If I were to pick off some random Substacker that is familiar with your work, either Castalia or Persuasion or any other Substack, like what do you think they would be like? What do you think are the articles that they tend to upvote from you, and what is the stuff that you write for yourself?
I would say it's all the inverse of how I would want it to be. Um, it's like the usual answer. Like the stuff that I put a huge amount of work into is fiction. So I have a bunch of short stories that are posted that nobody really reads. I mean, I've been writing a lot of novels recently, so I feel like I've really been getting my head around that form. And most of those I haven't shared. Now I'm going to start to share more of. But people just don't read a lot of long form fiction now. And there are all kinds of reasons for that. Like it doesn't really suit the internet. The people kind of need these social upvotes in order to want to read fiction. They sort of do need a publicity campaign to come before them. And I'm doing what I can to try to change that, but it's a hard thing in human nature to change. What people tend to respond to is they respond to kind of the political hot takes. They respond to sort of parasocial stuff. They respond to writing about writing. I mean, the flaw of Substack is that it's a forum for writers and it is social media. So it has exactly the same tendencies that you would have where like if you're at a party, like if you're hanging out at a party, it's a little bit rude or weird to be like having a deep conversation with somebody else. Like the tendency is to talk about like, oh, like here's this other person at the party. Here's what's kind of going on in the space. And so the stuff that tends to do well is when I'm like picking a fight with somebody within Substack, which I like to do sometimes, or there will be these kind of like discoursey things, and it's just natural. It's just human nature. But it would be nice to get beyond that.
Yeah, you talked quite a bit about how you're probably known more for like the hot political takes. I do think when you write for Persuasion, you're a lot more like the stuff that people would be interested in. You're talking about Trump. You're talking about like the world order and like current events and U.S. foreign policy and all that jazz. And
Yeah.
yeah, ironically, that was the thing that I was originally going to get you to talk about, and then I started to look through your I don't know what the word is off the top of my head. Your writing catalog. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it does. Yeah, how does it feel like when like you want to write a novel, like or you want to write some kind of like stuff that's like literature-esque, but you know that people care a lot more about American politics and they care a lot more about current events, and that's what's going to get you the traffic.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to care very much about traffic. Like it's just not. I mean, look, ultimately, these like subscriber counts and things they really don't matter very much. It's like going to a amusement park and having like the tickets that you're given out. I mean, it's not a very useful form of currency. So it's much more important for me to write in the way I want to write. I mean, like I'm interested in politics, so I'm very happy to write about it. I mean, fundamentally, I don't feel like I know that much. Like I'm not. Uh, I mean, I'm not a professional political operative. I've never been in government. Um, um, and yeah, I mean, there have been points where I've been more into. I mean, I was in Ukraine a bit at the start of the war. Just with documentary filmmaking, a lot of this stuff was very political. So So there are these things that I would get worked up about that I care a lot about, but it's becoming increasingly important to me to not be like consumed by Trump, to not be like consumed by kind of the political storm. So I feel that in my individual orientation to the world, I want to start with what I care about, which is expression, which is writing, which is creative fiction, and then to put like the politics in a little bit more of a subservient secondary position to that.
Even if that's the stuff that you're more known for.
Yeah, I mean, what's being known? Like who really cares? I just don't. At some very deep level, I don't find what's like in the discourse or what's hot at the moment to be of that much significance. I think that what's of more significance is this kind of like very deep expression that's hard to do and that socially we tend not to reward. And so it's just a paradox. And so like the way of living a good life, I think, has a lot to do with basically ignoring in a managed way what's kind of popular.
Do you ever worry if, like you putting like modern day politics in like in a subservient position compared to the stuff that you want to focus on? Do you ever worry that it might impede your ability to cut like during the times when you do cover those current events for Persuasion? Do you ever worry that it might be impeded and it doesn't have the level of nuance that it deserves because you haven't been devoting as much attention to it?
Yeah, I do worry about that. I mean, the kind of the road not traveled for me was really becoming like a reporter. And I mean, there are definitely times in my life where I regret that. Like, I think there was a period in my early 20s when if I'd had a bit more hustle or played my cards right, I'd have just more of kind of like a traditional reporting career. But there's something in my personality, like now that I look back on that, myself a bit better. Like there's something in my personality that wouldn't really have worked for that. Like for one thing, it's very important for me to write in the way I want to write and with my own style. And if you're a reporter, you usually have to like kill your style. You have to write in this kind of house style. So in a sense, that never would have worked for me. There's something in reporting and like cultivating sources that has a lot of like manipulation and a lot of exploitation in it. And maybe it's for a greater good, but my personality isn't exactly right for it. So I liked this kind of like longer form stuff. Like I really like doing these documentary interviews. I do interviews for my Republic of Letters now, which I enjoy doing, kind of like what you're doing, these like longer, thoughtful things. And that works better for me than if I'd been doing this, like hanging out in Washington, trying to cultivate sources. Like, I mean, like all the time that I spent doing documentary filmmaking was very educational in a lot of ways because what you do in documentaries is like you're given a topic and you very quickly become like an expert on the topic. And then you have to go kind of pretty deep into it. And you're talking to all kinds of people. And how to put it, like you just learn a certain skepticism. Like you learn not to be very impressed with authority. You learn not to be very impressed with like the structures of things. You understand the ways that most organizations are kind of like half-assing a lot ultimately. But then you also learn to have a very deep reverence for people's kind of like private lives or like the things that people really care about. So if you're doing a documentary interview, there's a lot of time of like, you have like the softball questions, you talk to the stuff that people think they're supposed to be talking about. And then at like hour 2 or hour 3 of the interview, like you get to the good stuff, which is really like where people's emotions actually live.
And then you edit out everything from the first hour just to, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, a documentary is really painstaking work. Like the people who do it are extraordinarily patient. And ultimately, I didn't have that kind of patience. So I was trying to get out of it.
All right. I'm trying to think if there's any kind of like cool final question that I could ask to wrap this all with like a bow tie and everything. Yeah.
Well, when I ask you a question, what do you feel like you're like in the podcast you're doing in like this phase of your life? What do you feel like you're really exploring? Like, what are you kind of trying to discover for yourself or get at, or what are kind of the burning questions internally for you?
So you know how Persuasion is an organization that's dedicated to all the buzzwords we said earlier in this interview of like liberal democracy, like embracing pluralism and free speech, and productive disagreement, and like all of that. I want to have all the sorts of tough questions that people normally don't like. I want to have all the tough questions and all the hard conversations that people normally don't have just because of norms and decorum. I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with this podcast, even if I usually don't state that explicitly.
Yeah.
But maybe to wrap it all with a bow tie, the goal of this podcast is to like have the tough conversations and get to like the complex, nuanced truths that people usually don't get in a conversation because they want to they want to not offend people and not offend people based on like social cues or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there were a whole bunch of shocks in the last decade. Like, I mean, I was a really good kind of Obama liberal, and there was this feeling of sort of the big questions having all been worked out, and then the way politics was going to play out were a bunch of like technocratic questions by kind of competent people. And then just seeing what happened with woke, seeing really some of the stuff with the pandemic, that there was just this clear sense of very deep institutional corruption. You know, all these people I knew who had these beautiful, expensive educations and then weren't able to use critical reasoning in any way. So that definitely took me to kind of a radical turn in terms of thinking in a much broader way. Like, I mean, right now, if any people come to me with a conspiracy theory, I'll make time for it. Like, I mean, I'm just kind of like open to any sort of analysis. So, I mean, in the end, my politics, I would say, are pretty centrist. Like, I think that's important. I think it's important to try to land on a governing center in the end. But in terms of kind of inquiry, I mean, I bounce all over the place. So, yeah. So, I mean, I appreciate your sensibility on it.
Sam Kahn, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto this podcast.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, make sure to follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts from. Until next time, goodbye.